morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. And welcome to our webinar, Why Your Business Needs a Rules Engine. My name is Jessica Potter. I'm an account executive here at Decisions, and today I'm joined by Akshay Bardwaj, one of our fantastic senior sales engineers. We're both absolutely thrilled to dive into rules today. But before we do that, let's go through a few upcoming events and some housekeeping notes. We do have a training event coming up next week from November 14th through the 16th in Dallas, Texas. Whether you're a completely new user to the tool or an experienced builder, we do have a track for you in either our foundations class or our master's class. I really personally love these events because beyond just the chance to get your hands dirty in the tool and build side by side with our team, it really is an amazing opportunity to interact with some of our current customers or prospective customers and learn about problems they're solving with Decisions. Again, whether you're a customer or not, this event is completely free. So come check it out and we'd love to see you there. You can register at decisions.com/events. Now, while you're at it and you're on decisions.com/events, I encourage you to check out some of our upcoming webinars. Next Thursday, November 16th, we will be hosting Requirements Gathering Made Easy with ChatGPT. If anyone was at our Decisions Days events earlier this year, you might remember we actually touched on this during our ChatGPT build-off competition. I know myself and Akshay are really looking forward to this one, as we both have spent many, many hours, days, weeks writing software requirements, user stories, and user acceptance documents, and know how long and tedious this task can be. Let us show you how to leverage AI to shave down that time and streamline the process while producing winning requirements documents. Now, later in the month on November 30th, we also have another great webinar. This is going to be focused on discussing use case database analysis. Now, again, you can find the details of these webinars at decisions.com/events. Switching gears here, actually looking back rather than forward, so not later in the month, but previously, in case you missed it, we have all of our previous webinars available on demand with topics ranging from document extraction to process mining, and yes, even chatbots, along with many more topics. These are all available to watch at decisions.com/videos. All right, on to the housekeeping here. We will save time for Q&A today, but you don't have to wait for that to ask your questions. Please feel free to use the Q&A or chat functions in Zoom to submit questions at any time. We will be monitoring this to see if we can answer those questions as they come in. It might even actually help drive our discussion today. Also, please let us know in chat if there's any use cases you'd like us to explore in the future. On future webinars. Is there a use case you'd like for us to demonstrate? Sound off in chat by looking for the two icons in the Zoom panel. Again, we will be monitoring along the way. And as much as I love doing these webinars just so that I can talk, really, these are all about you guys. We want to hear from you, your questions, your ideas, your feedback. This is your time and your opportunity to see and learn what's relevant to you. Now, at this point, you're probably asking yourself, Jessica, Akshay, what will we be doing today? And where we're actually going to be starting is with a brief introduction to what is Decisions. So for those of you who are completely new to our platform, it's just a brief overview. After that, we will, as the name of the webinar implies, cover why you and your organization need a rules engine. We're also going to touch on a few common use cases for rules engines across various different industries, different departments, and then we'll move into the 8 different Decisions rules designers. Finally, what everyone has joined for today, I'm sure, and is waiting on, we are going to be spending a lot of the majority in the platform today, actually seeing a live demonstration. We're going to cover rules in action from various different aspects, such as building rules, rules executions, even rule promotion. And of course, as mentioned, we will be sure to leave time at the end for Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, what is Decisions? We are a no-code workflow and rules platform, a completely visual way of designing custom solutions. So using a combination of our rules engine, which is a place to centralize your business logic in a graphical manner, and our workflow engine, a place to drag and drop steps to orchestrate and automate your processes, there really is an endless number of problems that we can solve. Now, while we are use case agnostic, there are three main automation patterns that we get involved in. So I do want to quickly go through those just to give you an idea of where else our platform sits. Now, the first thing that we're going to be talking about, the first automation pattern, is a pure business rules or decisioning application, and kind of the focus of today's webinar as well. But our rules engine is a place to centralize business logic and expose this logic to business users to edit and maintain using our graphical design tools. So this is going to get the logic out of stored procedures, out of web pages, custom code, and put it in a location that can be easily changed and maintained without having to pour through hundreds, thousands, or even millions of lines of code. Our rules engine is enterprise class. We run millions of transactions a day across thousands of rules in areas like medical claims processing, insurance underwriting, mortgage processing, hundreds of different areas. You name it, we likely have a rules engine use case out in the wild. Now, our next use case is what we call extend and expand. It's very common when we work with a customer that they already have some major out-of-the-box application that needs to be part of their automation solution, whether this be a CRM, an ERP, a database, or any other product, really. These things are built to handle a part of the process or a very specific part of the process. And they do these things well. So we're not looking to replace them, but we are here and really aim to help you integrate with these existing out-of-the-box solutions and automate the special parts of the processes that these applications don't handle well. So maybe custom rules around pricing or custom rules around packaging, shipping, or maybe you need a human in the loop approval process. This is where Decisions can step in. Now, to do this, we have several ways to integrate with your existing system landscape. We have a lot of out-of-the-box integrations, but I think more importantly, we can actually connect to anything that has an open API. And as you guys know, most modern systems have this. Taking the previous example a step further, we often act as an orchestration layer between different applications. So if you have several applications where you have users and data in, you can use Decisions as kind of a middleware to bring data in from one application, trigger an activity for a user in another application, and then populate an outcome in yet another. And this is a very common use case that we see, is to act as that orchestration layer or that glue between the various software applications or services, while also being able to engage end users and workflows that cross application boundaries. All right, one final plug here before we jump into some of the rules content is I do want to talk about demos. You know, if you want to see more, please sign up for a demo at decisions.com or send us an email at sales@decisions.com. We'd love to connect you with one of our engineers. We'll spend an hour showing you how you can use our no-code platform. Now, while Akshay is going to dive into the platform today and kind of give you a flavor of Decisions, we really like to give you that one-on-one experience where you can ask questions and you can actually drive us down different paths so that we can focus on the specific problem you're trying to solve. All right, so let's jump into some rules-related topics here. The first place that I want to start is kind of showing two different examples here. A lot of our customers are not totally familiar with the concept of a rules engine. So what I want to show is on the right-hand side, this is a relatively intuitive business rule for determining the correct dosage of different meds given a patient's weight. You can see how it's fairly understandable for a business user or analyst type. Now, on the left-hand side is actually the same logic, but it's contained in or it's rendered in C# code. And really the whole idea of a rules engine is to speed up the pace at which you can build rules. So the rule on the right-hand side, built in the decisions designer, probably took about 25% of the time as it took to create or write that out in code or C#, which is on the left-hand side. Another huge added benefit here is to make that rule accessible to non-developers. So now that we kind of understand what a rules engine is versus writing a rule in code, I want to talk about some of the benefits. We'll start with being able to eliminate manual work. Let automation not only make decisions faster, but also consistent decisions based on your organization's rules, free of human error or bias. Speaking of removing the human from the loop, guard your business by reducing errors. Humans are prone to making mistakes. I make them all the time. In business, sometimes though, these mistakes can translate or lead to costly outcomes. So use rules to protect against that. Reduce cost by automating approvals. If you know based on certain factors, things will automatically be approved every time with no exception. Again, remove the human from the loop here and automate those decisions. Free up the approvers or the person who would typically spend time approving these to work on tasks that might require actual human input or creativity that a rules engine might not be able to bring. Again, you can really reduce costs here by reducing the time it takes to automate some of these approvals or decisions. Now, tribal knowledge, this is another big one. What happens when employees leave, whether they retire or move on to another company? The knowledge contained in their head when making these day-to-day decisions walks out the door with them if it's not documented. So if you really want to make sure your rules or your business rules are documented. And while you're at it, take it a step further, go ahead and put them in a rules engine. Now, by using the decisions graphical design paradigm, you can really empower your business users to own, edit, and maintain that logic by pulling it out of code, as I mentioned before. And really, these are the users with the intimate knowledge of these rules. Shouldn't they be the ones who are able to own and maintain it? And kind of building on that concept, that brings us to one of the final benefits that we'll touch on today. Of course, there's many more, but you can reduce IT dependency by putting it in the business user's hands. So you don't have to involve IT every time there's a change to a rule. Your users or business users can quickly react by changing these without less hands, ticket backups involved. Now, some real world examples are listed here. I'm not going to go through all of these, but as you can see, we touch many different industries and departments. I'll pick out two of my favorites here. One of the first I'll talk about is Otis Elevators. They built a platform leveraging the rules engine that can evaluate and respond to real-time heartbeat data of these different elevators. So millions of records of heartbeat data a day are chugging through the rules, where this data is evaluated to determine if a particular elevator needs service before a customer calls in this request. So this allows Otis to be more proactive in maintaining elevators rather than reactive. Another favorite of mine is Arizona Department of Transportation. Rules around fees, taxes, and eligibility are changing on a regular basis due to a variety of different factors. Things like location, what county are people located in, depreciation, your car's depreciation value, and even legislation that's changing all of the time. All of these rules need to be able to be maintained and up to date at all times. So using the graphical rules engine paradigm, they're able to keep up with these changes quickly and effectively, ensuring that every calculation and decisions falls within the laws and regulations. All right, so let's go ahead and dig into the different decisions, rules, and designers here. And depending on what business logic you're trying to evaluate and the complexity of what you're evaluating, for example, maybe how many parameters or do those parameters intersect, or do you need to trigger another set of evaluations? Whatever the case may be, ranging from simple to complex, we have a rule type or designer for you. We're going to start with our statement rule. This is arguably one of the most commonly used rule types in decisions. It is your basic if then else statement. It kind of reads as a sentence containing the logic, so it's really easy to understand. You can do things like define multiple conditions. You can have either or statements. For example, if income is greater than X or credit score is greater than Y, then approve this loan. Now, that's not a rule that I would recommend you actually have in your use case today, but it's an easy example. Now, truth tables, these are another user favorite. This is actually my personal favorite rule. This really reminds designers of that Excel type layout where you have multiple columns where you can define these different conditions. And then you have multiple rows where you can define the parameters or scenarios you're evaluating against. The rule tables can output either one truth. So if you have a row where all of the parameters passed, or you can configure it to output a list of all of the rows that passed. So a lot of different settings and capabilities there. Now, moving on to our matrix rule, this gives users the ability to define rules or conditions across the top of the designer, as well as define conditions on the left-hand side. And the output of this rule is going to be the intersection of truths. If you need more complexity here, you can even nest these conditions within each other to really handle any use case needed. Now, rule chains, these are a set of rules combined together in sequence where every rule produces a fact that is both an output of the rule itself, but also can be consumed in rules further down the chain. These rules are both forward and backward chaining, so they are DMN compliant. Rule sets are a set of rules and flows that are designed to work together for complex data evaluation against the same input of data. Now, these rules can be of many different styles. You can have a set of statement rules, truth tables, matrix rules, you name it. They're all built to work together. And we have many different configurations for these rules that range from conditional type to even using them for custom scoring models. Expression rules, this is exactly as the name sounds, designed for evaluating expressions or calculations, again, as simple or complex as needed. Sequential rules, this is going to give the user the power of using the flow designer to connect or sequence a series of rules and steps together. Certain conditions must be met to send the flow or the data to the next path. So again, just a way of using the flow designer to kind of chain these rules together in a specific sequence. And then finally, we have our rule extensions. This is going to empower users to extend our default set of verbs. So the verbs being how you're evaluating the data. Again, extend it by using our workflow and our rule designer to create your own custom verbs. So if we don't offer an out-of-the-box verb, you can absolutely create your own using the no-code paradigm. All right, and with that, I am going to hand it over to Akshay. He's going to jump into the platform and run through our demonstration today.
So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you decisions, different size of the tool. We're going to look at a use case that involves rule management and having rules take decisions for you, how to manage those rules, how to expose them to the business users who actually own those rules for them to modify them, kind of manage them over the time of its journey. So I'm going to start by talking about decisions overview screen that you're seeing here. So decisions has two logical sides to it. One is called Decision Studio. You can look at as the dev side of the tool where you can log in as a business analyst, as a decisions developer, or even as a business user in order to create your own workflows. You can create your own rules. You can create your own forms, which can become the UI for your application. You can create very extensive reports and decisions on the data that's being generated within the application or that's coming from outside systems. And you can also integrate with external systems. So these 5 designers that you see that I'm hovering over makes Decisions a no-code automation platform. So you don't need any point of the code in order to build your complex rule engine or your workflows. Now, these are some of the external connectors that Decisions come out of the box with. So imagine your system of rules interacting with maybe Salesforce or an ERP system or even SharePoint in order to get some values that you would like to pass into those rules. So you can easily connect with these systems. Any systems that have RESTful API endpoints, which nowadays every system has, it's easy to connect from Decisions and plug that information into your rules or push those information into these systems from your rules as well. Now, this is about the Decision Studio part. Now, once you have created your application in this side of the tool, you can expose that to the end user using the second part of the tool, that's the end user portal. So end users can have, dashboards like these. They can have, different landing pages. They can have reports. So they don't have to go into the studio if not need be. They would only log in and see their actual dashboards to work on. Now, I would come back to this dashboard and spend some more time on different, elements it has. But I'm going to go back to the first phase of decision, first side of the Decisions tool, that's Decision Studio. Now, you can see that we have a couple of folders here. Now, in one decision instance, you can build several different projects that could be for the same department, or it could be for various departments within the organization. So that's how you can leverage the power of automation on a tool like Decision, where it allows you to create as much as you would like to. Now, we would be looking at this use case that we have built for this webinar. It's called Manage Rules. So you will notice that how, if a user is requesting for a credit or a loan, we would run that request, all the attributes about that user through series of rules, and then we will find out whether we should be approving a loan for them or not. And throughout the journey, we would also capture everything that happened in the process, which all rules ran, why did we take that decision? We would audit everything as well. Now, before I do that, I want to quickly spend some quick time on how we can create rules and decisions as a generic concept. Now, when I click on this designer that says create rule, you can see all the rules that Jessica talked about in her presentation. So in Decisions, there are 8 different rules that you can use to solve different kind of logical evaluations you want to put in your process. Now we have statement rules, truth table, matrix rule, just like how Jessica showed those screenshots. So let's create a quick statement rule so you can see how these designers look like and how a user can build their own rules without touching any code. So when I select the statement rule, it allows me to provide a name for this rule. So let's call it check salary rule. And when we click create, it takes us into the designer. Now, these designers help us to write or build those rules that you want to build in Decisions. Now, each of those designers will have their own look and feel. Since it's a statement rule, what you are seeing here is if part, where you can put in those if and else logic. So you can have a single statement, or it could be a collection of statements nested together by and or logic. And once it executes, it's going to give you some outcome in then part. Now, the outcome could be a Boolean, like it's showing in this case, or it could also be a certain score or a certain numeric value or a string that you would like to pass out as an outcome. And finally, you also get the option to define your input on which you want to perform that evaluation. So in this case, since we are building a check salary rule, we can create a simple input criteria here, and we can call it salary. And Decision also lets you to define what kind of input is this. Is it a Boolean value? Is it a date? Is it a decimal? Or it's a string. So in this case, it's going to be decimal. So we can select that and save this. So you can define as many inputs as you want in your rule. In this case, we're just taking an example with one input. Now, once we have defined this input, we just click on data element, and you would notice that salary is right here for us to consume to put a logical criteria on that. Now, when I click next, Decisions will show me all the verbs that I can use in order to build this rule. Now, Decisions is smart enough to find and know that since it's a decimal, so it will display only the verbs that will be pertaining to a decimal. But if it was a string, let's say if I want to check the name of the individual or their ID, which is a string, these verbs will change and show me things like starts with, ends with, the characters in that string, and so on and so forth. So decision helps the business users and whoever is building these rules in order to kind of streamline and filter down the process to make it easier for them. Now, in this case, we're going to select something like greater than or equal to. So in this case, we're going to check that the salary of an individual has to be greater than or equal to a certain threshold for us to process their application, let's say. So I'm going to use this verb and click next. And here, I would just define that threshold value. So in this case, I can put a value, let's say 4,000. Now you would notice that here I am taking a constant, but this value can also come from external systems so that your rule will be entirely dynamic in nature. So when I click done, our rule is finished and it has a statement where to check the salary and it gives me a true or false value, which I can use in the other rules that I want to run or in the flows that where I'm consuming this rule. Now, a couple of more things, since we are on a rule designer, it comes with unit tests and sample data. So when you're building rules and decision, it gives us an opportunity to pass it through hundreds of unit tests that can potentially occur in your main use case. You can set that up here, and you're also able to debug the rule in the same paradigm in which you build it. So let me pass in the value of salary that our rule needs. Now, when I click start debugging, it runs that rule with the input which I provide and check it against the threshold which we have. So in this case, we will get a true Boolean because the value is greater than 4,000, which is our threshold. So this was a quick example to show how easy it is to build rules and decisions without using any code and also being able to test them throughout their journey.
Now, Akshay, what if I wanted something beyond a Boolean value or true or false? Can I output data here, maybe like approved or disapproved? Guess that would be
Absolutely.
rejected.
Sure. So you can just click on add and it'll give you, more options that you can use when this rule triggers. Now you can trigger more workflows depending on, which outcome our rule gave, or I can also set up a new output data. So for example, in this case, let me have a result called outcome. It's going to be of the type string. And in this case, I can provide the string output. So I'm going to say approved. And if it's less than 4,000, the salary, we would say, the process is not, the person is not eligible for us to kind of process their application. So this is how you can add in more output to the same rule. Now, in this case, not only are you going to get a Boolean output, but also a string output, which you can use in your process further down the lane. Good question, Jessica. So I'm going to save this rule here and close out of that. Now, once I do that, you would notice that we will have an element that's called rule in decisions right here, check salary rule. Now, in future, if you ever want to go into the rule, make changes, you can just click on that. It'll take you right into that rule which you have built and will provide you an easy access to modify it over time. So for example, let's say if I want to provide, more scrutinized loans and I want to stop the bad loans from giving. So I can increase this value, let's say to 6,000 as a business user or even as a business analyst who is interacting with the process. Now, the next time we run this rule, it's going to approve the loans only for people whose salary are greater than 6,000. So this is how easy it is to go back into the rules, change them, and also be able to track the different versions, which we'll just look at. Now, this was a quick overview of how we can create rules, and the process remains the same, whether we are creating a statement rule or any of these rules. We set up the input criteria, then we define those logic, and we have a rule built-in decisions. Now, we're going to spend some time in the project that we built for this webinar called Manage Rules. Now, the use case here you would see is that the users would be able to request for credit. And as we pass those information about the user into the rule engine will decide whether we should approve this request or reject this request on certain attributes. Now, to manage this, business users can be exposed to a dashboard like this that you're seeing. So in decisions, we can create very complex dashboards, and this is built from scratch. So the look and feel, the colors, the placement of different controls would be as per your requirements. Now, this is a sample use case which we have built. Now, there are a couple of things to note here. So as a business user or as a business analyst, I would have access to this dashboard when I log in, where I can check in how many rules do I have in my process as of now. How many rule authors do I have who can make more rules, change the existing rules? and what kind of rules are we using. So these rule types are, the statement rules, the matrix rules. So it just tells me how many different types of rules do I have in the process so far. And it also gives me an idea when was the last modification done. Now, there are some other graphs which you can kind of have. This is a rules by type. So if I click on, let's say, the rule, which is a statement rule, it's going to give me a report, which will show me that, hey, these are the different statements rule which are running in your process right now. This is the name of those rules, who created them, when they were created, and when they were modified. So you can make these dashboards very interactive so that you can kind of consume information in different ways. Now, this right here is what we call as rule creation wizard. So the business users, they don't even have to go into Studio to build their rules. They can do that directly from the UI like this. So they would just pick what kind of rule do they want to build, and they would just provide the name for the rule. And they're also able to put their rule in the right folder or the right team. So in this particular example, when we are approving loans, there are different rules running in the process. Some of the rules would be related to the customer history, and some of them would be involved with, will be like the risk assessment. And you can also imagine these as different teams who are maintaining this process. So we can have a customer history team, risk assessment team, and several other teams. And we would have the option to create rules into different teams folders so that they can manage it over time. Now, this right here is a reporting decisions. It helps us to track how many rules do we have right now in the system. So just like how this KPI tells us that we have 5 rules, in this report, you can see all 5 rules which are used in this business process. Now I can see the name of the rule, who created them, when they were created, who modified them last, and I also have the ability to edit or delete these rules. Now, as a business user or analyst, if I have this report, I can just click on this edit action right here, and it takes me right into the rule. So I have the option to make change to that rule. So this is how that rule looks like. As a user, if I want to make any change, I can change the attribute which is coming in, or I can also change the threshold values along with the outcome for that rule. Now I'm going to close that and come back here. On the right-hand side, what you're seeing is another report. In decisions, we are able to capture all the versions that a rule has gone through. So it's a common use case that we make changes to the rules, whether they are related to the threshold values or we are adding more evaluations within the rule. So in decisions, we keep a copy of each rule version we create. So you can see that for this particular rule called income versus existing customer rule, we have 2 versions to it. So this is the first version when it was created first, and this is the second version when somebody made a change to it. Now, if we ever want to go back to previous version, we can just right click and click on restore from backup. So in short, we never lose any change that we make in system. It's smart enough to kind of keep edit or audit of everything that's happening, so we can always go back in the past. Now, this was a quick refresher on this dashboard, but this is just for the simplicity purpose for this use case. And as I said, these can be very dynamic, can have more controls as you want, because everything happens from scratch and you design as per your business requirement and use case. Now, the other part of this dashboard right here is a rule execution report. Now, every time some application comes into the system, so on the left-hand side, you can look at them as different request IDs or different applications which have come into the process. And on the right-hand side, we are able to see everything about that evaluation. So we can see a report of the customer information, who they are, their age, and all the personal information about that user. Then we have a report that tells me, what was the final outcome for this evaluation. If is rejected flag is true, that means we have rejected that, and otherwise it would be false. That means we would approve that. And this right here is the audit history of all the rules that ran when we executed this process. So you see all those 5 rules that we saw in the first dashboard, whether we are evaluating the credit or we are checking if the customer is high valued customer. You can see all the rules which executed on which date and time. And this audit history also tells me that what was the input that came in and what was the verb and what was the output for this rule execution. So imagine if we are working in an industry like insurance or healthcare or even the banking. So we don't want to lose on anything that we are working as of now. So we can always go back in the past, in future. So this helps us to kind of keep an audit of everything that we're doing. And this again is another report that kind of breaks these inputs down into what was the input, what was the threshold, the verb that we used, and also the phrase. So this was a quick example of how we are able to capture so much about a process. I'm going to take a brief pause here to see if we have any questions so far, Jessica.
Yeah, so I actually have a great question here.
Sure.
The rule audit history is very important to someone's organization. Are they locked down to just using the decisions report to get this rule audit history, or can they send that data somewhere else?
Oh, absolutely. That's a good question. So everything that we create in decisions gets stored somewhere, whether it's an object in the database or it's an object outside decisions database. So you can always push this data into your external systems. You can create a BI reports out of that. You can also create an Excel file, a PDF file, which could be sent as an email attachment to somebody who wants to review these reports. So there are different ways you can consume these data, but it's fully flexible to push this data out of decisions anytime.
Awesome.
Great question there. Thank you. So we're going to come back to this dashboard once we execute how a new request comes in, different stages it takes, and how this will automatically populate once we run that. But before I do that, I want to quickly talk about department level dashboard. So here you would notice that it's a generic dashboard called rules management dashboard. Now this can belong to, you may be a PMO team inside the business who kind of captures and manages everything that's happening. So they can have visibility to all the different departments and all the different rules they're using. But there may be a use case where different departments have their own dashboards to manage only their rules, where they can manage, create, own only their part of the business process. So this is one example. I'm logged in as rs_john@decisions.com. So this person belongs to the risk assessment team, let's say. And when they come in, they would be able to see the rules for only that team. How many authors does that team have, and how many rule types are they using? And this again is a rule creation wizard that they can use. And this right here are all the rules which they have currently in their department, which are being consumed by the main process, which is the loan approval process. Now, they also have the ability to create their own rules. So we'll create one rule real quick. But at this point, I'm going to go back to this dashboard right here and execute this business use case. So in decisions, when we are building workflows and rules, there are different ways to trigger them. One of the ways could be to use a rule inside workflow. Or the other way could be to make a call to decisions rules headlessly. So there's no workflow involved. You're just making calls to decisions rules directly through API endpoints. So everything in decisions can be exposed through APIs, just like this process which we are seeing right now. Now I'm going to go into Postman, which is an API client. You can use any API client. In this case, I'm using Postman to kind of simulate this business process which we are just looking at. So there are a couple of things to observe here. One is that it has this end point, and this points to the actual workflow which runs this loan approval process, which we are just looking at. So Decisions is able to create this endpoint for you. You can plug this into your code, or you can call it on your UI, which can be built on React or Angular, where you click a button, it makes a call to this URL, which eventually runs this workflow and the rules inside that workflow. And you're also seeing that it's going to be a post call. And here's the body that would be sent into all those rules that will run. So a couple of things to observe here. That this is a complex input going into the rules. So you can see it has an object called customer basic info, which further has several attributes inside that. This means that we are able to kind of extract each attribute from this object and push them individually into the rules and decisions. And this right here is another object called customer financial details, where we can capture, details about their financial, health, like their income, their employer, are they employed, and all those things. And this right here is a customer risk profile, which gives us further more information about the user. And these different attributes help us to take a good decision whether we should provide them a loan or just reject their case with some reasons. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click send here, and you would notice that a call will be made to decisions. So let me hit select. And you would notice that the call is being sent, and you see that we get a 200 response, and this is the time it took to run that, fairly quick. So when I expand that, you would notice that in this case, the rejected flag is false. That means we approved this loan. And this is the ID that we can use to track it throughout the process and also be able to report on that. And this is the evaluation score for this user. And the reason here you see as null, because we have granted them the loan. Now, this is the case where we pass the result. Now, I'm going to run one more Postman call where you would see that the evaluation rejection will be true. But before I do that, let's go back in the dashboard so you can see the call we just made. The RID 63 is for Carol Smith. This is their initial information. And you can see that this rejected flag is false, and they have an evaluation score of 40. And here in the audit history report, you can see all the rules that ran. Why did we take that decision? Every condition that ran in the process. And this right here, you can see their input values. So this was their credit score, and this is what we checked against. And this is the output that we received. So this is how we can track things when they are running in the process. So let's go back to Postman one more time. And I'm going to switch the tab in Postman, and I have one more JSON structure here with my post endpoint ready to be called. So I'm going to click send once again. It makes a call. And this time you would notice that the rejected flag is true. That means that we did not accept their request because it failed because of certain criteria. So if I go back in my report again, I would have 64 as the new request ID, which has come in for James Russell. And you would notice that there is rejected flag is true. That means we have rejected that request. And to know why we did that, we can capture that through our rule audit history. And in the future, if we ever want to kind of poke into that, what kind of users are getting rejected, so we can make our model even smarter so that it knows what's the typical user behavior for us to approve their requests. So at this point, I want to take another quick check, Jessica, if we have any questions so far.
Yes, so this is actually perfect timing. Alex has a great question here. Can you show how you expose the rule as a REST call that other systems can invoke? So now that we've actually seen Postman simulating another system call decisions, let's show them where we got that information from.
Sure, absolutely. So let me go into the rule which we just created at the start of this demo, where we are checking in this, if the salary is greater than or equal to 6,000, this would be the output. So what we would do here is every rule and decisions come with this option to configure integration. We just click on that, and decisions ask us what kind of service do we want to expose this as. And I can also provide the data format, let's say JSON. Click done and click view. Now, what decisions will do for us is it's going to generate this endpoint that we can use to consume it. Now, it's going to give us a get call and also a post call so that you can use any of those to make a call to this particular rule. And you can also set up the security for your API. You're able to set up the username, passwords. You can also do the JWT tokens as well. So as you can see on the right-hand side screen, what we have is a get endpoint and also a post endpoint. So in this case, let's even use that post to make a call from Postman one more time. So I'm just going to select this information that decision has generated for me, go into Postman, and we would just paste that endpoint right here. And we can also mention that this is going to be of the post HTTP type. And all that we need to do now is provide the JSON payload for this request. So in this case, it's going to be this right here. So I select that, paste it right here. And now you see it's only asking for one input, which is salary. And so we can pass in salary. Let's say we go with 10,000 and I make a call to this rule. So when I click send, it's going to get back the values from that rule execution. You see we have two outputs here. One is true, which is a Boolean that we have kind of accepted that because their salary is higher than our threshold. And we also get the outcome. So it just depends on you. How do you want to consume this data further into your workflow or your application that's calling this rule? But this is how easy it is to do it through decisions. Does that help, Jessica?
Yeah, Alex, that was a great question. And, really what we've seen here, Akshay, great example and showing us how to set that up. But yeah, with just a couple of clicks, you're going to have all the details you need to have a copy and paste exercise of setting up these integrations. Save yourself a lot of time trying to come up with the API documentation. Let Decisions do it. Take a couple clicks and you're off to the races.
Absolutely. And just how we ran that single rule, we can also bring that into this particular process. So we are also able to capture, why did we take true as a decision for that execution, so that we can know, okay, their salary was greater than that threshold, and that's why we approved it. So this was a quick one on, how we can call rules, how we can execute rules. So I'm going to go back into my my risk assessment team's dashboard. And right from the dashboard, let's see what all we can do other than just tracking the information. So as I talked about, that we are also able to see all the rules that are there in the system. And we have these quick actions to kind of edit a rule, create a rule. So when I click on edit, it takes me right into that actual rule so that I'm able to make any modification. So what you're seeing right now is a matrix rule that Jessica talked about. So it has a structure of a row and a column, and the intersection of these two inputs will be my output. So in this case, if we have to read this, we'll read it like this. If the outstanding debt is between, let's say, 0 to 50K range, and they have 0 default loans in the previous year, this would be the output that we'll give them. So we're going to give them a high score of 10. And we're not going to check in the rejected or not mention anything else, because in this point, we are trying to find out what kind of score should we assign to this user depending on different attributes they have. And similarly, if I click on one more cell here, you can see in this case, we assign them 6, which is lesser evaluation score than the previous one. So this is how you can kind of maintain and edit rules. Now, the other quick thing here is to create rules as well right from this dashboard. So let's create a simple rule. So let's go with statement rule, and we can call it check age and income rule. Now, since it's a rule for risk assessment team, they would be creating them in their own rule folder so that they can always manage it. And that rule will appear right in this report once it's built. So I'm going to click on create rule here. And when I do, it takes me right into the rule designer. So I'm able to write that rule for this particular team. Now you would notice a very familiar screen. It's going to be a statement rule. The first thing we would do is define the input in this case. Now, in the last rule that you saw, I used this option to define salary. But in decision, we can also use design patterns, so your users don't have to redefine those inputs again and again. All they would do is just pick on the design pattern which is assigned to them, click OK. Now, inside this design pattern, I'll have all the inputs that I would need. So you will notice that when I click on here, in the rule inputs, you would see all the objects that have those attributes inside them. So one of the things we want to check in this rule is the age. So I'm going to go into customer basic info, and you can see all the attributes packed into this object. So I'm going to use age, click next. It shows me all the verbs because it's an int, so it shows me all the things that I can do with an int. So in this case, I'm going to say that their age has to be greater than or equal to 31 for me to give them higher evaluation score. And I would do that only if they meet one more criteria. That is, their salary is above certain threshold. So I go back into the rule input. But in this case, instead of going into the basic info, I'm going to go into the customer financial details, and all the attributes would be accessible. I'm going to pick income, click next, and I would say that their income has to be greater than or equal to certain threshold for me to give them higher score along with their age criteria. So in this case, I'm going to pass in, let's say, 8,000. So with that, my rule is built. I can save it, put unit tests, and also be able to debug just like how we did that, and also be able to provide the output. So just I click on edit, and this is the output object. We can define different output objects. In this case, we're going to give evaluation score of 10 if they meet this criteria. If they don't meet this criteria for some reasons, we're going to give them a lower score so that when we are looking at their profile at large, this evaluation score will help us drive the right decisions. We'll click OK and save this rule. Now, once I do that and go back into my back into my dashboard, you would notice this rule will appear there. So let me save that and close it here. So I come back, do a quick refresh. Now you would see that instead of 3, we have 4 rules running on this team, which is the risk assessment team. You can see that number right here. And our rule, which is check age income, appears right here for us to work on. So this is how easy it is to kind of manage your rules and kind of change your rules and keep adding and editing over the time of its journey. So I'm going to take a quick pause here to see, Jessica, if we have any more question coming in.
Yeah, I actually have 2 questions here. Akshay, let's say me and you are on the same team. We're both on risk assessment. I create a rule. I'm having a bad day. Maybe I skipped lunch or skipped a snack. We all know how I get when I skip my meals. And I build a rule that is just designed in the wrong way. And maybe I leave for the day or I leave for the week. Can you or another user go in and edit the rules that I make?
Yeah, brilliant question. Now, important thing to note about this is that in decision, everything works on permission basis. If we two belong in the same team, it's high chances that we might have the same kind of permissions to work on different rules. But if I were in a different department, I might not have access to your rule, Jessica. But in this case, since we are in the same team, and as you can see on this report, although this rule was created by Ashley Wilson, but me impersonating as artist_John, I'm able to go into Ashley's rule and make changes to that because I have the right permissions to make that change to her rule in decisions.
Awesome.
Great
So another
question.
question that I have is, let's say again, maybe I'm out and you make a change to one of my rules. Maybe this rule is already running in production. You make a change here in our development environment. Before pushing that to production, can I put an approval layer on that? Maybe we want our manager to take a look and make sure that change makes sense. Can we do that?
Brilliant question. And this happens, way more than often. What we do is in decisions, when we are creating these rules, we always keep a check before it's moved to the production or an upper environment. So when we are trying to save or check this rule into higher environment, we would have a quick task assigned to their managers or somebody who is maintaining this business process. So they can kind of review the change before it's finally pushed into the external system or to the production system. So there's always a need for that, and we have the option to establish that as well in decisions.
Perfect.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk about one more thing before we kind of wrap it up for the question answer. So in decisions, we can also execute unit tests in bulk. So I'm back in my rules management dashboards, and you also see there's a button that can trigger the execution of different unit tests. So when I click on that, it's going to show me this quick form where I can pick that which folder do I want to kind of test those all those unit tests which are in. So in this case, it's going to be department rules. So I'm kind of running all the rules which are there in different departments. And all I do is execute unit tests. Now, what it does is it takes in all the, the rules that needs unit tests. This first column here tells you the rules which we are running. So we are running unit tests on evaluate credit score rule. We are checking the is history is high value customer rule, and also the income versus existing customer rule. And on these rules, these are the inputs, these are the unit tests which we have set up. And this is the result that we get. So when we are creating very complex, business use cases and rules and decisions, we have this option to kind of always have them pass through unit tests before we consume them in production or the workflow level. All right. So these are the things that I wanted to, show you guys how easy it can be to kind of build workflows and rules engineering decisions, and also be able to capture, edit, modify over their journey. So I'm going to take a quick pause again here, Jessica, if you have any more questions.
I don't have any at the moment, but what I'd love to do is, Akshay, do you mind if I steal your screen here for a moment and talk about what's next while
Yeah,
people put in
absolutely.
their questions?
Sure,
Awesome.
no problem, Jessica. There you go.
Thank you very much. So we have a couple minutes here. As I'm going through this, guys, just feel free to put your Q&A or your questions in Q&A or chat. But just want to touch on what's next. You've seen our webinar today. again, encourage you to set up a demo. Let's schedule a demo. Let's get that one-on-one experience with an engineer like Akshay. We have many engineers who are also fantastic, but we love diving into the platform again with that one-on-one experience and really going through your specific use case, your specific needs, and talking about that. Also, attend an event. Check out further webinars. Check out our training events. Our Submerse events. Again, that's going to be at decisions.com/events. And we'd really love to see you in person, interact with you in person. And again, great opportunity for you to interact with other peers, whether they're in your industry or not, and learn about some pretty cool use cases. There's a lot of things that people are doing with decisions that I find absolutely fascinating. I think you guys will too. So please come out and hang out with us. I'm going to go ahead and throw this up here. And Akshay, do you see any questions or anything in the Q&A or chat?
Yep, I think we answered all the questions that we got.
All right. Well, if you guys do come up with any questions that we were not able to answer today, or maybe you're dreaming in workflows and rules tonight and you think of a question, please feel free to contact us at sales@decisions.com, support@decisions.com. We'll get those questions answered for you. You can give us a call or, pop by the office, come visit us. But thank you guys for your time today. We hope you learned something, and we'll see you on the next webinar.